In my teens, when I realized that authors were not rare creatures who were given the job to write books by some enigmatic book boss, that they actually chose to do this of their own free will, and that the publishers would sometimes take these stories and make them into books, well, I knew I was all in. I seem to have huge epiphanies on the big 0 years. Since I first wrote my enlightened fanfiction, 19 years had passed, and I had not yet finished writing a book, mostly because I didn't know my process. Now, I know very well that I'm a plotter, but back then I sat down at the keyboard with only a glimmer of an idea for the first few scenes, after which the muse went silent.
Welcome to the Stark Reflections on Writing and Publishing podcast. There has never been a better time for writers. More information, options, and opportunities are available to you, but navigating these requires insight. Join Mark Leslie Lefebvre as he draws upon more than a quarter century of experience as a writer, a bookseller, and a trusted book industry consultant to explore and reflect on the writing and publishing landscape to help you make informed choices on your writer journey.
Hello, Reflectives, and welcome to episode 210 of the Stark Reflections podcast. This is your host, Mark Leslie Lefebvre. In today's episode, I have a fascinating keynote from Morgan Rhodes. No, it is not a conversation with Morgan Rhodes, although I am hoping to connect with Morgan and get an actual conversation, ideally in time for the release of her next book, which we'll mention shortly. But Morgan Rhodes is a pseudonym for Michelle Rowen. Now, under Morgan Rhodes, she's published 6 books in the Falling Kingdons series, and her Razorbill Penguin Teens novel, Echoes and Empires, which comes out in January of 2022. Now, Michelle Rowen is the best-selling and award-winning author of over 24 other novels. She has written for Penguin, Grand Central, Harlequin, Dorchester, and Bloomsbury. She's a former president of the Toronto Romance Writers. She lives in Mississauga, Ontario, where she refills her creative well by watching trashy reality TV and drinking a lot of delicious coffee. Now, what I loved about this keynote, which was given in August of 2021, at When Words Collide, which is a conference that normally takes place in Calgary, Alberta, but was virtual this year. This was Morgan's keynote, and it was fascinating because she gets into creative block, writer's block. She gets into the writer's superpowers and the writer's kryptonite. It is a fascinating exploration of her life as a writer, wanting to, from the earliest age, to become a writer, and then becoming a writer, and then what happens when some things go south and they don't work. So I love how honestly she shares the struggles that she has gone through and what she has done to overcome some of that creative block. She is an amazing author. I have had the opportunity of connecting with her years ago. I still actually have a signed copy of one of her romantic thriller novels from way back when I was doing a lot more physical book selling, and it was really great to get a chance to reconnect with her in this digital forum for When Words Collide. And it is a fascinating keynote, and I'm thrilled to share it with you and hope that you find it inspiring, entertaining, and informative. But that's coming up later in the episode. First, let's get to a word from this episode's sponsor. This episode is sponsored by Findaway Voices. Now, Findaway Voices is a subset company of Findaway, which is a significant player in the audiobook industry and has been for a significant amount of time. You notice how I said significant? Because I don't have the actual number of years in front of me. But if you ever remember going into a library and seeing these little plastic devices called Findaway players, these were self-contained audiobook players for people who wanted audiobooks but maybe didn't have CDs or cassettes or however the different media that audiobooks were available in. It was just, you would check it out from the library, you could plug and play, you just plug it right in and press the play button right on it. These were hugely popular, particularly for soldiers in the U.S. military. And that's how I first learned about Findaway, but then I bumped into these wonderful people years later at Digital Book World. And the minute I saw them, I said, hey, you're the guys who created these cool little players, that Hamilton Public Library, which is where I had discovered them. And then I learned that Findaway Voices was an offshoot from the Greater Findaway, which is a massive audiobook distributor, to 43 plus places around the world. They are audiobook distributors for major retailers as well. And Findaway Voices is the independent, author-friendly section of the company. It's a sub-company within a Findaway. Will is the CEO of Findaway Voices, is an amazing guy. In non-pandemic years, get to hang out with him at conferences. It has been way too long. I've only had the pleasure of hanging out with him in digital spaces in the last little while. But what I love about Findaway Voices is it's a small company with a lot of heart, or at least the Findaway Voices part is the smaller part of the company, because it's a small, dynamic team of amazing individuals who basically are charged with either helping authors find a professional narrator to work with from their pool of thousands of professional narrators around the world, or if you already have the audiobook ready to go, you can upload it directly to Findaway Voices. Now, Joanna Penn and I have just finished the mastering of the audiobook for The Relaxed Author, which is coming out September 18th, 2021. Jo recorded her voice. I recorded my voice. I then stitched them together and then mastered the files using Adobe Audition, following the very, very handy, freely shared tips from Wesley, who is the audiobook engineer, the head audiobook engineer at Findaway Voices, and he walks you through the process of how to master them to make sure it's good for every single one of Findaway Voices partners. And we just finished that process, and Jo, as the publisher through Curl Up Press, is in the process of loading those files to Findaway Voices to make them available in more than 43 retail and library distribution channels around the globe. If you're looking for ways that you can leverage Findaway Voices, these are just two of the amazing tools and opportunities available through Findaway Voices. You can check them out over at starkreflections.ca/Findaway. I'm not sure if you heard in that last segment, cars going by. I had the window open and cars going by in the background, but right now I can hear it is recess time at the school, which is sort of across the street and on the other side of the block. But it is so awesome to hear the sound of kids out at recess playing and screaming and yelling and laughing and all of those things. It is such a heartwarming thing to see, particularly because we're in a time where a lot of people have been locked down and not able to get out. And I know my son, for one, had his first day of grade 12. He kind of missed 2 full years of high school because of the pandemic and distance learning, and was just so ecstatic to get to hang out with his friends. Now, fortunately, he had a part-time job, and if it wasn't for the part-time job where he actually got to go out and works at a grocery store and got to interact with people, I can't imagine how hard that has been, especially on children who, one of the things I love about kids so much is we have less prejudices typically. The younger we are, we just accept everyone. We want to play with everyone. We want to be friends with everyone, and we lose that and we subdivide the older we get. And so just listening to the unabashed joy of these children warms my heart. And I'm thinking of all of the young people who have missed out on some of those in-person opportunities, as we're still in the midst of fourth wave of this pandemic. And I know it's not going away soon. I know we still have to be diligent and careful, but it is just so heartwarming to know that they're there together and just learning in person, socially distanced, safe, with masks on and all of the things, and as many of the people vaccinated as possible to try to prevent the spread of this pandemic. But just such a heartwarming scene. So anyways, I closed my window so you can hopefully not hear the cars driving by, and may not hear the boisterous calls of those beautiful young people. But that's an aside. So that was my personal comment. I do want to share some comments from recent episodes. There's been so much love on Twitter and other social media for the forthcoming The Relaxed Author that I've co-written with Joanna Penn. And oh my God, I am overwhelmed and verklempt with such kind comments. Too many to reference here. I'm so sorry. Thank you guys so much. Thank you everyone for sharing your enthusiasm and excitement and talking about pre-ordering the book and how much you're looking forward to it, and is it going to be available in audio? And yes, it is. It's going to be in audio and paperback and large print and ebook, and almost any version imaginable on any platform should be available. You can order it direct. I'll have links to where you can get it direct in the show notes, which is going to be directly from Joanna's website using PayHip, secure service. So great opportunities. But anyways, I thank you everyone for your comments. I have to share one of my favorites from Rachel Heron, who has been on a previous episode of this podcast. And on Twitter, she said, "Congrats, you two crazy kids. I can't believe you just joked about it. And now it's a real book." And thank you, Rachel. And that is the origin. Now, this morning, I'm recording this on September 9th, 2021. Just this morning, Joe and I recorded an episode, which is going to be a special episode of the Creative Pen podcast and Stark Reflections podcast. Obviously, we're going to have our own intros and stuff like that, and we're going to edit it together slightly differently. But it is Joe and I in conversation, talking about the creation of The Relaxed Author, which was a lot of fun to do. I'm probably going to have some special clips available and outtakes and stuff like that because of some things that happened during the recording of it. But just so great to hang out and chat with Jo again. Although I have been chatting with her a lot lately, but it was just more relaxed now that the book is done. And we get into that. We get into the fact that we are not relaxed authors, but we want to be more relaxed, and this book has helped us in many ways. So thank you for that comment, Rachel. And then for the last episode 209, which was Carrie Flanagan and Chuck Harrelson talking about their Twitch experiences and marketing and co-authoring and all those fun things. Edwin Downward said, caught Carrie Flanagan and partner on this week's Stark Reflections podcast with Mark Leslie. Their idea of marketing via Twitch is intriguing. The idea of reaching a strongly SFF audience is worth exploring. The only other author I know who uses Twitch is Joshua Pantalaresco. Joshua has, of course, been a guest on this podcast as well, and I've been a guest on his podcast as well. I'll have links to that in the show notes. Thank you so much for that, Edwin. Thank you, Edwin, and thank you, Rachel, and thank you, everyone who leaves comments. You can comment on episodes of the podcast over at Mark Leslie on Twitter. You can also leave comments over at starkreflections.ca where you can see the show notes for the episode. But that's it for the comments section. I'm just going to do a brief personal update. So as mentioned, the work on The Relaxed Author with Joanna Penn is wrapping up. Actually got some notes back from the proofreader, went back and edited and tweaked some things and remastered some things. Realized I was missing 2 complete files, which I was in a bit of a panic mode, but we've resolved that, and Joe's now loaded them to the platforms. I have got print copies, early print copies of the book that I'm going to be shipping out to 2 of the winners, 2 of the lucky winners who filled out the survey. Now I'm going to be signing and sending those off, and this is really exciting. I've gone back into recording the audio for my book on pitfalls, publishing pitfalls for authors. I started on that the other day, and I'm going to chip away at that while I continue to work, get back into the fiction, Fright Night's Big City, which I still haven't done, and it feels like I'm procrastinating, so I'm going to need to do something to kick myself in the pants for that project. But it's okay to take a bit of a break, to take a bit of a breather between those things. Now, in terms of other personal stuff, I was supposed to be going to a number of conferences. I was supposed to be going to the Career Author Summit with Jay Thorne and Zach Bohannon, and I had to say no to that. I was having some challenges negotiating the travel. I was supposed to go to Nashville to be a keynote speaker at that conference for September 18th. Which is the launch day of the book for The Relaxed Author. And Joe and I picked that date initially because we were both supposed to be at that conference in person with a whole bunch of amazing authors. And I'm so sad that I'm not going to be able to make it. And And I was supposed to go right from there to Florida to Novelists Inc., which is also a phenomenal conference I love going to, and not able to get there. The challenge isn't necessarily getting out of Canada and getting there. It's the logistics of getting back. Now, I do have 2 other in-person events booked, which are I'm doing a 2-hour keynote for New Jersey State Writers Group in New Jersey, in Clark, New Jersey, which is just about maybe half an hour outside of Manhattan. And I'm looking forward to that, and I'm going directly from there. I'm flying to New Jersey, and then I'm going to Vegas for 20 books to 50K, or 20 books Vegas, and I'm looking forward to that. That's going to be a major event as well, and then that'll probably be the last travel. I'll probably have to quarantine for 14 days when I get back, so figuring out the challenge and the logistics of all of that will be interesting. In the meantime, still trying to put aside some time for my work, and trying to get more of that writing and editing done as the deadlines sneak up on me, as they often do. But it makes me think, as we're in early September, is asking if you are going to be NaNoWriMoing, if you're going to be doing anything for NaNoWriMo. I'm probably going to sign up for NaNoWriMo to see what additional work I can get out, because I do find it motivating to have that stress and that deadline of getting a special project completed during the month of November. It'll probably be too late for me to do Fright Night's Big City, but there's another book or shorter project in the Canadian Werewolf series that I would like to do. And so that's something I'm really looking forward to checking out. So yeah, leave me a comment. Are you planning on NaNoWriMoing for 2021? If so, let me know. Maybe I can connect with you there, and we can kind of follow each other and egg each other on, or cheer each other on, I should say. And one last update on where I'm going to be speaking. I had the great honor, the great privilege of being interviewed by Honoré Corder, who was on this podcast not that long ago. I'll have a link to that episode in the show notes at starkreflections.ca, to be a part of her Empire Builders Summit. So this is an opportunity to go behind the scenes with more than 20 world-class empire building experts, discover how to expand and grow your streams of income. Now, this event brings together the best business empire builders in the industry to teach you how to grow your empire and your income. And it's free for a limited time. It's a free online event that's going to take place between September 13th to the 17th. And there'll be a link to that in the show notes over at starkreflections.ca, because this is a $997 US value. And you can get a free ticket, and I'm going to have a link to that over at the show notes, starkreflections.ca, because I am honored to be among these amazing speakers who have been featured in TEDx USA Today, NBC, CNBC, CNN, CBS, ABC, the New York Times, Forbes, Fox News, the National Academy of Bestselling Authors, and Entrepreneur, just to name a few. I'm so privileged that I get an opportunity to appear virtually with such amazing folks, and obviously the incredible Honoré Corder. There'll be links to that, as I said, over in the show notes at starkreflections.ca. But that's it for my rambling personal update and the pre-show matter. Why don't we get right into this fascinating keynote from Michelle Rowen / Morgan Rhodes.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining me. And thank you so much to everybody at When Words Collide, the amazing organizers, the volunteers, and the other speakers. I'm so grateful for the invitation and the chance to meet so many kindred spirits, both yesterday, today, and tomorrow. Everyone attending this conference clearly loves books and loves writing, and we love using the gift of our big, beautiful imaginations to share our stories near and far. Writers of all genres, pre-published or published, indie and traditional, well, we seriously rock. When first asked to be part of the conference and told that I would be doing a keynote speech, I had no idea what I would talk about. I've seen a lot of keynote speeches over the years, like a lot. Some resonated with me and some didn't. The ones that did tended to lean on the experience an author had during their journey, the good, the bad, and the ugly, such as the false beliefs they had about writing going in, and also the truths that they learned along the way that made them stronger, smarter, and more resilient to the roller coaster, and it is a roller coaster, that is writing and publishing. I was around 11 years old when I decided that I was going to be a writer. No, not just a writer, a published author with books on the shelves, somebody who did this for their career. My favorite author at the time was Enid Blyton. She wrote middle grade novels full of danger and adventure. I don't actually remember much about these books other than the way they made me feel, but I remember the young characters had a widowed mom, and through their adventures, the kids made friends with an older man who had a really cool trained parrot or a cockatoo or something like that. The first story I ever wrote was about the mother and the adventurer's wedding after the kids played Cupid, since clearly that needed to happen in the story and it didn't. This proved two things to me: that I had an imagination and that I was a total control freak. If a book or a TV show or a movie didn't turn out the way I wanted it to, I'd go ahead and imagine how I would have written it differently. In my teens, when I realized that authors were not rare creatures who were given the job to write books by some enigmatic book boss, that they actually chose to do this of their own free will, and that the publishers would sometimes take these stories and make them into books, well, I knew I was all in. So I set aside my previous career goals of being a world-famous actress and or a jewel thief. Seriously, I aspired to both of these careers, mostly based on the books I read as a teen, and I started writing. Or I tried to anyway. I quickly realized that writing a novel is not as easy as the movies make it out to be. I figured I'd be filled with inspiration and sit down in front of my typewriter. It was the 80s, okay? And peck away at the keys consistently until I had a perfectly polished 400-page novel. Just a magical stream of consciousness gifted by the muses themselves. Yeah, no, that's not how it works, at least not for me. So back to a couple of the main beliefs I had when I first aspired to be a writer. One of them was this: you need an English degree, an MFA in creative writing, and or you need to have an in with somebody who can help you get published. With this belief, I majored in English literature at Carleton University in Ottawa, well, for 1 year, before I dropped out. I knew, without a doubt, that a degree in English Lit wasn't going to guarantee me a writing career. What it would guarantee me was a path toward teaching high school English. And while teachers are beyond awesome, no doubt in my mind about that, I knew I wasn't teacher material. What I did know was that I was a genre author, drawn to romance and fantasy. I greatly admired literary authors, but didn't aspire to become one myself. What I did know was that I needed to educate myself about the writing business. This, not to date myself, was in the late 90s, when the internet was becoming way more accessible and filled with all kinds of information. So I did a deep dive. I read author blogs mostly, hyper-focusing on the business and the process of writing. I learned about query letters, synopses, agents, and publishers. And then I got seriously overwhelmed and forgot about it for a couple of years, especially since I knew no one in the business. I realized then that my middle name was Slushpile, and it wasn't a good feeling. But I still loved books, and I still dabbled with writing. Then I turned the big 3-0. I seem to have huge epiphanies on the big 0 years. Since I first wrote my Enid Blyton fanfiction, 19 years had passed, and I had not yet finished writing a book, mostly because I didn't know my process. Now, I know very well that I'm a plotter, but back then I sat down at the keyboard with only a glimmer of an idea for the first few scenes, after which the muse went silent. That bitch. But I was still hyper-focused on the dream. So I took some online workshops through Writer's Digest, including a really expensive one that paired me with a published author. She helped me choose the idea to focus on from my long list. This idea was very special to me, prompted by my deep mourning and grief after having lost something very special to me in 2003. Yes, Buffy the Vampire Slayer had been canceled after 7 seasons. There are very few people in this world who are bigger Buffy fans than I am. I channeled this grief into a story about a woman who was turned into a vampire by her blind date and the wacky and hilarious adventures that ensued for her after that. My writing tutor seemed oddly complimentary and encouraging, which felt genuine. I didn't know what to make of it since I'd always been hypercritical of myself. So you mean this idea is good? My writing is capable? I am not sure I believe you, madam. Despite the seed of doubt, I finished the book and I had to decide, what now? We were in that frightening area again, the area filled with potential rejection and dashed dreams. So I did what I needed to do. I procrastinated. I hired an editor for far too much money, and this editor came back with only a couple of small notes and the advice to start sending it out to agents. Damn. Back to research. I made a list of agents I'd found online and in a big fat book they used to have called Writer's Market that was updated yearly. Half the agents took email queries then, half took snail mail. Like a brave little toaster who'd run out of procrastination venues, I sent a half dozen queries away to my top picks, and then I drank a bottle of wine. One day later, an agent replied to my email query. He requested the full manuscript, but cautioned me that there was another vampire novel on his list, but he still wanted to take a look at mine. I sent it off to him gleefully and with great trepidation. 4 days later, I got a call. The call. I have an agent. And yes, I know this is not how it usually happens, but it did. 0 contacts, slush pile, me, no confidence, and full of the expectation of being rejected. I had an agent. And it's the same agent I have to this day. And he's so very, very awesome. He sold Bitten and Smitten shockingly quickly to Grand Central Publishing. So the question is, to get such swift representation and a sale to a New York publisher, was my book really that special? Well, yeah. Well, I mean, I like to think so. But in actuality, no, not really. I quickly realized that publishing is a business with a capital B. And as luck would have it, paranormal chick lit was a hot genre in 2004. I'd written something that was a solid story, but also highly marketable at that time. Long story short, no pun intended, do you need an MFA or major contacts in the publishing business to write a book and land a book contract? Nope. What you need is persistence, a passion for storytelling, and a big slice of luck. But honestly, a degree in creative writing and an editor BFF probably wouldn't hurt either. Here's another belief I had about writing when I started out. Writer's block doesn't exist. I totally believe this. After I got published in paranormal romance, I wrote a lot. I averaged 3 to 4 books a year at the beginning of my career. I even quit my soul-crushing day job way before I probably should have, and I don't regret it for a moment. So I hustled to make enough with my advances to pay the bills. I hit every deadline. I nailed every editorial revision. I moved from one project to the next, smoothly and methodically, for nearly a decade. In 2014, my career was at a high. My publisher really supported the Falling Kingdons books, sending me on book tours that have taken me across North and South America and getting me on panels at tons of really cool events like San Diego Comic-Con and Word on the Street. They'd even had a book trailer for Falling Kingdons that played in the few US movie theaters before The Hobbit. Things were good. And then I got smacked in the face by a big brick wall. Hello, writer's block. Or for me, a more appropriate term would be creative block. Suddenly, after a decade of being prolific and hitting my daily word counts, I became the embodiment of that famous Douglas Adams quote, "I love deadlines. I love the whooshing sound they make as they go by." Only it wasn't funny at all. My get up and go had got up and went. Don't get me wrong, I still loved being a writer. I still loved my ideas and the characters, but I couldn't focus. I had to constantly beg for extensions to get my first draft done, my edits, my proofreading. In the past, there'd been something inside me that would belly up to the bar when things got tough. I would pull an all-nighter to get something done on time. I can only describe it as this fire inside of me, that incredible hyperfocus I'd had for so long when it came to my writing. It was gone. and it freaked me out. What was this? At the most pivotal time of my career, when I felt like I was building something that connected me to readers who were so enthusiastic about the series and that would pave my way to the rest of my life as a writer, was it over? Even at my worst, I got the job done. It took me a while to gather my focus and do what I had to do, and I still enjoyed the writing and getting into the zone, but it was 10 times harder than it had been in the past. It felt like a job now rather than a dream job. And I worried that I was burning bridges, annoying my hardworking editors and setting myself up for a reputation as a flaky and unreliable writer. Immortal Reign, the final book in the Falling Kingdons series, came out in 2018. It was supposed to be late 2017, but my deadline whooshing pushed it to the following year. It was time for my option proposal. I had a new idea for a book, even if ideas weren't coming to me as easily as they had before. It took me 6 months to write that proposal, which is a long time for me. My publisher liked it, but due to my lousy track record for hitting deadlines, they rightfully asked for a full manuscript before they'd seriously consider it. Fair. Totally fair. I'd write that full in what? A couple months? No problem. My focus. I couldn't focus to save my life. What should have taken me a couple of months took me 2 years. And let's face it, I'm not George R.R. Martin. Only Jar Jar Martin is George R.R. Martin. But finally, I had a finished book, and my very patient, very understanding and supportive agent loved it. Luckily, my publisher did too, and they bought it. And that's the book that comes out in January called Echoes and Empires. But even with the new sale, I knew my inner creative fire was still only embers, and I couldn't figure out what was wrong with me. If writing had been my superpower, something had become my kryptonite. I continued to struggle with writer's block, creative block, lack of focus. Wait, no, I had plenty of focus, depending on the subject. Online shopping and spending tons of money on dumb stuff. Total expert on that. Animal Crossing on Nintendo Switch. I currently have 2 5-star islands. Candy Crush? Last time I played, I was almost at level 5,000. But doing what I wanted to do more than anything else, writing, being prolific, sharing my imagination with readers, I just couldn't pull it together. Finally, out of desperation and knowing that my graphic design skills were a decade out of date, I called my family doctor. I can't focus, I told her, and it's ruining my life, my career, and my finances. Huh, she replied. Sounds like maybe you have ADHD. I blinked. No, that's not it. I mean, I wasn't a 12-year-old boy doing zoomies around a classroom. My doctor sent me a questionnaire, and I had to rank from 0 to 3 things like, is easily sidetracked, starts a task, and switches to doing something else, has difficulty setting priorities, getting organized and getting started, procrastinates excessively, keeps putting things off, needs extra time to finish tasks satisfactorily. Well, crap. I called a friend and said that my doctor thought I might have ADHD. Well, yeah, she replied. Great. So I did what I always do. I researched and learned, and yes, hyper-focused, which apparently is a trait of ADHD, on learning everything I could about this disorder. Apparently, I realized not everyone struggles with the things I've struggled with all my life. Adulting actually was harder for me, just like about 5% of everyone else in the world. Yay. Coincidentally, this diagnosis came 2 weeks before another big 0 birthday for me 6 months ago. Having ADHD is not an excuse, but it is a reason. And now that I know what it is, I've been treating it. My focus isn't 100%, and there is no magic pill, even though there are lots of pills. But my awareness of this issue, which, spoiler alert, is both my superpower and my kryptonite when it comes to writing, has vastly improved in almost every aspect of my life. So, does writer's block exist? I fully believe it does. And you'll know it when you hit that wall. But if you're really committed to writing books, you'll find a way to slay that dragon, whatever it is, and steal your fire back. Like I did, like I'm doing, and like I plan to continue doing for the rest of my life. I love being a writer and having the ultimate privilege of getting to hang out in my imagination all day long. And then come to amazing conferences like this with other writers who also slay their dragons on a daily basis. Seriously, what better job is there? Thank you so much.
There were several things about this keynote from Morgan/Michelle that really inspired me. And it was so great to listen back to it. I mean, I remember listening to it the day it was happening, and listening back to it just now, and as I was going through, editing and mastering the audio, etc. It was so fascinating to consider the long-term work and effort and dedication that she put into writing, and has always had in her writing. I'm inspired by just how vulnerable and authentic she was in that keynote, in terms of admitting the struggles with ADHD, with creative block, writer's block, etc., and even acknowledging the things that she misunderstood or misinterpreted about how the book industry works. Yeah, she admits to where she's been lucky, but it's so funny. I bet you that the harder she worked, the luckier she got. I was also then looking at her other titles, because she doesn't really get into that. She's got this great The Immortality Bites series under the name Michelle Rowen, which is, bitten and smitten and fangled and fabulous. And obviously it's got like this playful urban fantasy, humor, romance elements. And, so she's got this very successful series. And we don't really get into hearing much about her book. So that's why I'm so looking forward to having her on the podcast. Then she's got the Nightshade series, again under Michelle Rowen. And I was going to look for, I was like, I know I have an autographed book from her. And I looked and I couldn't find it. I couldn't find it under Michelle Rowen. I couldn't find it under the Rhodes. And then I found Michelle Maddox Countdown. It was an advanced reader's copy. A little Canadian author from Dorchester publishing sticker on this mass market paperback, and it was It was coming out July 2008, and I've got this signature from her, and that was republished several years later by Harlequin Teen as Countdown, the same title, with a much better cover than the one I have. But I have this special collector's edition, and so I was just thinking about the different genres, the different styles, the different publishers, and it didn't matter when things got hard and she fell down. She figured out ways to pick herself back up and to keep at it. And she's got the next urban fantasy series, or I should say that more epic fantasy that's coming out on top of the different urban fantasy and the romance and all the different things that she has written, and she's got books translated in multiple languages, and she hasn't really it's funny, it just felt that she was not, it felt that she was very humble in her approach, and not acknowledging just how amazing an author she is, but again, she's focused on the work, she's focused on the passion, and she's focused on being honest about the challenges that we all face as writers. So I hope that you found something inspiring in that fascinating keynote from Morgan/Michelle. And I know I look forward to the opportunity to connect with her and see if I can interview her for this podcast to talk a little bit more about some of her other writing and potentially ideas for ways that authors can deal with some of those struggles and challenges that they face. Well, that's it for this episode of the podcast. I hope you found the keynote talk from Morgan Rhodes inspiring. I hope you found the reflections interesting, intriguing, and potentially even inspiring. Maybe if you have reflections of your own, you can leave them over at starkreflections.ca. If you enjoy this podcast, you can support the podcast over at patreon.com/starkreflections, where patrons of the podcast get access to additional content, including my reflections on other podcasts and other bonus content. There will be some special bonus content from the Relaxed Author coming soon in the podcast feed in the next couple of weeks. But one of the ways you can support this podcast is leaving a review on the podcatcher of your choice. That does really help. Or better yet, share this podcast with someone that you think would find value in it. So until next week and next episode, this is Mark Leslie Lefebvre wishing you great writing and good Stark Reflections.
Thank you for listening to the Stark Reflections podcast. You can find show notes for each episode at starkreflections.ca.
The music for this podcast, Laser Groove, was composed and produced by Kevin MacLeod. Check out more of Kevin's great music at incomptech.com.